What we're seeing, I think, is a sort of settling out in the international community into the factions which eventually may fight World War III. And so it's not surprising to see China, Russia and Iran on the one side and the United States on the other. So this is, I think, really what's going on here is that you've got a group in the West that are so hell-bent on war that they refuse to speak sense in this very Orwellian fashion. Nothing that they say from one day to the next really adds up to rationality. And it's almost like, because of the control of the mass media, it's not even supposed to make sense anymore, because the media looks the other way when these things happen, like we're talking about tonight. So I think they're playing God really in the West. They want their cake and eat it. They want to have their cake and eat it, which is what we mean when we say that they want to call the shots. They don't really want to negotiate. And if the negotiations start to go against them, then they will just simply go back to square one and reiterate what they first said they wanted. So it's very difficult to deal with the sorts of people when you're negotiating with the United States over Iran and nuclear weapons. And even just the nuclear program, they will say weapons. Of course, nobody else really says that. What you realize is that you're actually really negotiating with Israel. And you're negotiating with other countries. And when you allow them to come and do your weapons inspections, just as we had in 2003 with the Iraq War, you will find that they're not there to inspect the weapons. They're there basically to do reconnaissance and spy in order to do the strikes that we saw back in June 2025 by the United States. So they're very, very difficult people to deal with, if you even wanted to deal with them at all. And I do commend Iran and the other countries we mentioned for even still dealing with the United States, because at least then you have some possibility of some sense coming out of this, and also a future for humanity. Because it seems to me that the United States particularly is pushing for confrontation on almost all fronts.
Exactly. Mr. Gosling, is this split, the rift inside the UN Security Council on Resolution 2231, now one of the most serious fractures in international law? And what do you think that means of how global rules are going to function in the future?
Well, international law is breaking down, it's broken down. And do you know what? It was really, I think, in the 1960s, this started to become clear at the United Nations with Resolution 242. This is going back a few resolutions. And with 242, which was the resolution to say that the Israelis had to withdraw from the 1967 land that they had stolen in the Six-Day War. And that has been ignored really ever since. So it's resolutions like 242 that have slowly but surely, and the Israelis and the Americans, of course, were key in making sure that resolution was sidelined and ignored, etc., that have begun the process 50 years ago of really tearing up international law, and particularly putting the Zionists in the United States, in Europe and the United Kingdom in the driving seat. So the idea is that we can have international law, but don't expect it to apply to the Zionists, wherever in the world they might be.
Exactly. So if, Mr. Gosling, 2231's provisions have formally expired, as Tehran, Moscow and Beijing argue, what does that mean for the push by Western countries? What do you think they're doing right here?
Well, look, they are trying to continue the pressure on Iran to say that Iran has got this nuclear program which could be enriching nuclear material to make nuclear weapons. But let me be absolutely frank with you. There is common sense pressure on Iran building for Iran to have nuclear weapons. Because you look around the world at the countries who have made peace with the United States, and that the United States is now, for example, with Ukraine and Russia, Russia is a nuclear power. The United States is seeing sense. We don't want to have a nuclear war, so let's try and make a deal in Ukraine with Russia. The same with North Korea. The United States is calming down its pressure on North Korea because they have nuclear weapons. What the United States is doing by this policy, although for many people they can see it as common sense, is it's signalling to the world that if you want to have peace with the United States, you have to obtain nuclear weapons. And obviously that is not lost on countries like Iran, who are getting so much pressure from the US. Countries like Venezuela, for example, they will be also thinking, maybe we should obtain nuclear weapons, because the United States is a very, very dangerous power. I think actually very much like Nazi Germany in the 1930s, threatening countries around it, and actually, as it has been doing in the so-called war on terror, invading anyone it seems to feel like at the time. So they need to be dealt with. The United States need to be dealt with through treaties, but it seems like they're not deal ready. They just don't want to make deals. And if they are pretending to try and make a deal, then they usually betray that deal very soon afterwards. So very difficult to know what to do with the Americans, only to say treat them with extreme caution.
Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.